All right, we'll get started. I know I'm the one standing before you before lunch, but we have a late start, so right around noon, don't get all edgy. I'll tell you when we are done, okay? I used to be the dictator when I was the chair. I will continue to do so in this small session I got. Hi, everyone. Since I got your attention, my name is Amit Mutsoudi, Director of Wastewater at EB Mud. So I will be moderating this session. Hopefully you found a seat, and we had a late start. Those who were coming late, we will be targeting at around 12:30. So at last year's meeting, our nutrient session centered around an impending nutrient watershed permit, which was adopted in July 2024. So now we have nutrient limits and a compliance timeline, and coincidentally, a noticeable spike in our blood pressure among the treatment plant managers. I don't have jokes like all the other ones, okay? I will be more focusing on such a hard topic, and hopefully find humor in it. Anyway, this year, so we are shifting gears on how we can support each other while we tiptoe through the regulatory tulip of compliance. Let's think about it as less of a doom and gloom and more teamwork and caffeine. We'll kick off this thrill ride with Lorian Fono, who will walk us through the BACWA's efforts to tackle the group reporting and special provisions in the permit. Think of her as our tour guide through the nutrient jungle. After that, we'll hear from Mike Falk, who will share what we have learned from our members about the creative alternatives being considered for our compliance. Spoiler alert, there would not be any magic wands, but there will be graphs, spreadsheets. Finally, we'll turn our panel to our member agencies who are in the thick of selecting projects to stay on the nutrient nice list. These brave souls are the pioneers, the nutrient ninjas, if you will. So with that, Lorian, take it away.
Thanks, Amit. Tour guide for the worst tour ever that you pay $11 billion to attend. So I said there wasn't any science on the agenda today. This is actually the one science slide. I think most of you have actually seen it before, but for those of you who haven't, back before 2022, we believed that the bay was resilient to nutrients. We actually have one of the most nutrient-enriched estuaries anywhere in the country, and 86% of those nutrient loads during the dry season come from POTWs, not agriculture or stormwater runoff like you see in other regions of the country. But we didn't have the same impacts that you see other places in the country in terms of algal blooms and DO drops for the reasons that are listed here. So algae is a plant and it needs light to grow, and so if you've been in the bay, you can tell that there isn't a lot of light penetration. You put your hand in, you can't see more than a few inches down, and that suppresses the growth of algae. So you've got strong tidal mixing. You've also got high winds often during the year that mix up both the nutrient concentrations and dilute the phytoplankton concentration, so you don't get stratification where you have a layer of still water on top where you can get algal blooms. And then we also have a population of filter-feeding clams that lives in the bay that feeds on those algae once they do grow. So we were looking at the bay, both BACWA and the Water Board and other stakeholders up till 2022, thinking, well, we discharge a lot of nutrients, but there don't seem to be any impacts. We'll probably end up with load caps. But then we had the big game-changing event, and you've seen this one before from the San Francisco Chronicle. The author of this article said that she was barely able to get this title or this headline past her editorial board, that poop and pee cause algal blooms in the San Francisco Bay. And I liked that it didn't say that wastewater treatment plants cause algal blooms, because we're not making it, right? And it's going to cost $11 billion to fix the problem, and I'll get back to where that $11 billion estimate comes from. And of course, it wasn't that it was an algal bloom, it was the fish, very visible fish kills. This is a picture I took at Lake Merritt. Here's a sturgeon, one of hundreds that washed up on the shores of San Francisco Bay. So obviously we were going to end up with a regulatory response. So the vehicle by which nutrients are regulated in the Bay Area is the Nutrient Watershed Permit, which was first adopted in 2014. And it was more of a watch and see permit, so it required us to do monitoring and group reporting of our nutrient loads, support the science through the San Francisco Estuary Institute. Once more, I want to put in a plug for this neat little document that shows where our funding has, where that support has been spent. And then a requirement to do a special study to look at nutrient reduction opportunities through optimization and upgrade. And we submitted that to the Water Board in 2018. It's a very large document because the team that did it went to every single wastewater treatment plant and did a planning level analysis. Watershed permit number 2 was adopted in 2019, continued monitoring and reporting, continued and actually increased support for the science at that point, and it required a follow-up set of studies on nutrient reduction via recycled water and via nature-based solutions. So the large algal bloom in 2022 and a smaller one in 2023 happened during the term of that permit. And so when the third watershed permit was approved last summer, it included monitoring and reporting still, continued support for the science, but the big difference, of course, was for the first time ever, it had load limitations. It included requirements for compliance milestone reporting to show how agencies were moving and progressing with complying with those load limitations, and then it required regional planning as well. And so Mike Falk, with the HDR team that is helping support our reporting efforts, is going to be talking about the compliance milestone reporting and some of the nitty-gritty of the regional planning, but I just wanted to continue to delve into the watershed permit a little further. So first of all, it requires a 40% aggregate dry season load reduction. So that's 40% overall when you add up everybody's loads. And it's dry season because that's the sensitive season where it's warmer and there's more light. And potentially more stratification in the water. So we're more likely to see algal blooms then. So the 40% was apportioned to agencies based on current performance. So how it worked was every agency got a target concentration of 20.5 milligrams per liter that was multiplied by their effluent loads to get a load allocation. So you don't have to meet that 20.5 milligram per liter concentration limit. You can achieve those reductions, their load-based limits, so you can divert your loads from the bay via recycled water. The Water Board gave us a 10-year compliance schedule, which was the maximum that they could give us under state policy. They also recognized in a resolution that they adopted immediately after they adopted the permit that the 10 years wasn't going to be enough for many projects, and so they directed staff to look for additional regulatory mechanisms to extend the compliance schedule. And so what the Water Board has told us just a couple of months ago is that the alternative that they're going to proceed with is a non-TMDL basin plan amendment that would lay out an alternative compliance schedule for nutrient reduction. And because it's a basin plan amendment, it would need to be approved by the State Water Board and so could supersede the state compliance schedule policy. So that's something that they are working on right now, and we will be engaging with them. And then the last thing that I wanted to note from the permit was that it does allow nitrogen trading. So that 40% is kind of a funny number because those of you who are permittees are probably looking at it being like, my agency doesn't have to reduce 40%. Some agencies actually have a little room to increase their loads to accommodate growth if you already reduce nutrient loads. A lot of agencies in here have to reduce their loads by more than 40%, including some of the larger agencies. So the 40% number isn't is meaningful from a Bay-wide context, but not from a your agency context, and you obviously already know that right now. And what this looks like for individual agencies is shown here. So the blue lines is each agency's dry season load from 2024, and the red line is where they have to be in 2035. So you can see there's a pretty large spread of different load reduction requirements. So that means that the approach used by different agencies is going to be different. Bill didn't say this today, but in the past has referred to each POTW as a snowflake, and this continues to be the case. And it's going to be evident as we continue to do our reporting, and I'm hoping to hear from our panel today about how agencies are taking their individual drivers and constraints into account as they're choosing alternatives. So I wanted to just get back to that $11 million number. It comes from that optimization and upgrade study that we did as part of the first watershed permit, and those numbers were escalated to $2023. Some of the projects that are included in that are based on what agencies are actually doing, but other agencies are looking at different approaches than those that were included in that report. Some of those approaches are less costly than what was included in the report, but many of the agencies that were already moving forward when that report was written have had a lot of escalation and bids coming in higher than what they thought. So I think this number, plus or minus a pretty wide margin, is still the best that we have to work with, but as we move forward, we'll be able to refine that a little bit better. And I do note that level 2 in that report, it was 15 milligrams per liter, which is lower than that 28.5. But in general, that's a technology-based target, and an agency isn't going to be aiming for that 20.5 because they're going to have to be accommodating growth in the future and variability. So what are agencies planning on doing? I've trotted this out before, but it captures the different bins of activities. So there's synergistic upgrades when aging infrastructure is replaced, because ultimately nobody wants to be replacing brand new infrastructure that they just put in that doesn't benefit their community. Near-term opportunities with existing infrastructure, so this is looking at use of dry weather capacity, it's optimization where possible, and then multi-benefit projects such as recycled water and nature-based solutions, like what Bill said. Ultimately, if we're going to be spending these dollars, we want to maximize these benefits to our communities and do that whenever we can. And what each agency has as an opportunity is very different. So one agency with excess dry weather capacity can make use of that, but not every agency has that. Some agencies have willing recycled water partners or land where they can build nature-based solutions. Other agencies are in highly urbanized areas. One agency, who I don't think is here today, but they're built in the middle of a freeway cloverleaf, which, as you can imagine, really constrains what you can do. And then, of course, I wanted to add in these hokey little hurdles, and this isn't going to surprise anybody here. So we're dealing with a lack of state and federal funding that wasn't envisioned even last year when we embarked on these projects. Competing capital priorities, we did know about that. I don't think that the Water Board would like us to abandon our sewer rehab and projects because we need to move funding over to nutrient reduction. And certainly if you're doing a big seismic upgrade, you don't want to stop that work because you need to reduce nutrients. So we need to keep our plants running while we are reducing nutrients. Competition for resources between agencies. The shorter the timeline that we have to do these projects, the more we're going to have agencies who are going to need to make use of the same contracting resources, including consulting, including materials. So we want to be able to minimize that. And then brand new tariffs and supply chain uncertainties. It felt like we were moving out of COVID to a brave new world, and now we are faced with a lot of uncertainty about what materials and chemicals are going to be costing, which is super, it's unfortunate. And this doesn't even get into the complexities of multi-agency agreements for doing recycled water and the barriers of implementing innovative technology. So we have a lot to grapple with, and certainly BACWA can't help getting over all of these hurdles, but we're going to look for areas where we can move the needle to do what we can. So part of that is the regional planning. So the Water Board put the requirement to do this regional planning study into the permit, but this is something that BACWA wanted the opportunity to do as well. And this allows us to generate a narrative that can be used for a lot of different purposes. So first of all, we're going to be forecasting regional projects to chart a path to Bay-wise compliance and to identify opportunities to collaborate with each other, to lay out construction schedules to inform the industry. I've been told there isn't actually enough industrial capacity in our region right now to do the projects that we need to do. We are going to need to attract additional industrial investment in our region to be able to actually comply with this permit. Communicate about costs and rate and affordability impacts both to our communities but also to the electeds who hopefully in future administrations can help us fund these projects and not just rely on rates. So compile information to support the Water Board's Basin Plan Amendment, to provide extended compliance schedules, to inform the Bay Area Air District to allow them to allocate permitting resources. So you heard from Meredith this morning that they recognize that the permitting process can be a bottleneck, and they don't want it to be, and they don't want to stand in the way of, say, the Water Board's priority implementation. And then the regional plan can help us support a trading framework. Excuse me. So how can trading benefit our region? So for many of the agencies that are really interested in trading, it allows them to close the gap between what their project can accomplish and where they need to be for the nutrient load allocation in the permit. And for some agencies, especially small ones, it could allow them to defer doing a project that doesn't make sense. It could be an additional revenue stream for agencies that are decreasing TIN loads before the limits, and then it's a tool for providing a value for TIN that can be used in interagency agreements where wastewater is moving between the boundaries of different jurisdictions. And so the graphic here is from a 2017 study that the Freshwater Trust did on developing a trading framework that EB-MUD actually funded as part of an EPA grant. It shows different types of trading programs that we could pursue. There's a central exchange, or you can do agency to agency direct trading. Ultimately, I know that the agencies in this room need to get a level of certainty about whether we're a go or no go on trading. So our first step is going to be circling back with the Freshwater Trust to answer some of the key questions about whether this is viable in our region, so that we can tell you, especially the smaller agencies who aren't necessarily represented in this room, whether this is something that we can go ahead with. Because what we've heard is that some agencies are relying on this as an alternative for their compliance. So this is the last slide. I just wanted to make it very clear what BACWA is doing and what your agency needs to do to comply with this permit. So your agency, this is the most important thing. Everything else you can recover from if you forget about, but this is, you need to plan and implement your agency's compliance schedule. Or they're not schedule, strategy. I just say schedule a lot, but we'll support you in any way we can, but ultimately, this is something that you need to plan for and be able to articulate and be able to implement. And then, you should also continue doing the monitoring and reporting included in the permit. I wanted to thank the HDR team for scraping the data out of CWIX now, so you don't have to fill in the special worksheet anymore. You need to respond to the requests for information that get sent to you for these other reporting products. And then fund the nutrient compliance work and the science through the nutrient surcharge that you receive every year on your BACWA invoice. And then if you want to be more engaged, then participate in the nutrient strategy team. So we met regularly as we were gearing up for the watershed permit up until July, and it's been quiet since then as we've been kind of getting the wheels in motion for compliance, but we're putting together the scoping plan for the regional plan. We have a meeting on May 12th, and we want the community's input on that. So that's really the best opportunity to be engaged on some of these regional issues. So what BACWA is doing, so first of all, as we have for the last 10 years, we're developing and submitting the group annual report. We're submitting the compliance milestone reports that Mike is going to be talking about. We will give your agency plenty of warning and support for these RFIs that go out. When possible, we will also show you draft RFIs so you can tell us when we're asking you stupid questions that don't make any sense so that we can nip that in the bud before the RFI goes out. We're going to be working with the HDR team to develop the regional plan, take steps to develop a trading framework, and then support the nutrient management strategy science program, both by funding it and engaging in the science decision-making. So with that, no QR code here because I don't think you should be reading 1,000-page reports on your phone, but you can always go to our website and download any of these reports that we've been talking about, and feel free to email me. So with that, I would like to bring up Mike Falk, who is the head of the team that is moving forward with many of these reporting products that we've been talking about. Thank you.
This was my coffee cup, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
I was checking my slides earlier.
And yeah, they gave me a Mac to work with today, which I haven't used since like 2008, and I really honestly...
We had it.
Yeah, oh, sorry, did I miss it? Is it this one?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So thank you for bearing with me. Awesome.
All right, thank you, Lorian. So I'm between you and your nutrient ninja warriors. So I was going to first kind of give an overview of the recent group annual report that gives you a feel for how the dischargers are doing over the last few years. That was submitted this past April. So it gives a really nice overview of how we're doing and the advancement of things. Lorian mentioned the compliance milestone report, which was submitted as part of that group annual report. The intent here is to walk you through the plots to give you a context for where agencies are moving in terms of whether or not it's reuse projects, traditional treatment infrastructure, and so forth. And I'll follow it up with something that's come to light as of late. I shared some of this data earlier in the week for those that were at Central Sand for their water reuse chapter, as the role of precipitation on meeting nutrient limits. You know, there's a lot of agencies that part of their portfolio includes reuse. And for rather wet seasons like this past year, what's the implications on demands for recycled water during, in particular, those May and June months as the groundwater levels are still high? And it's important to make note of that and working with the water board to provide some clarity looking into the future. And then lastly, talk about the next steps. I think Lorian captured most of that, so I'll keep it brief there. So let's get into the group annual report. This is a screen capture of the cover. For those that are keeping score, this is something that we started in 2015. So we are 10 years into this. And I just thank Charlie Hammond, who's here on the second row, for coming up with that script. That we didn't have to deal with CWIX anymore. And it just really streamlined the effort. CWIX has a wealth of data. It's just not the easiest to navigate at times. To give you a feel for things, we started sampling the influent in July 2019. So we're at a point now where we've got several years of data. The area where folks have a lot of attention is on the discharge. To give you a feel for things, given how wet it was this past winter, the winter before, we saw an increase in average flows. But when you start to look at TIN, which is really the thrust here, we did see a 7% reduction compared to the last 4 years. And as Lorian showed a slide with some data, which I'll share as well, my version, that really showcases that we've reached a point, which I would call steady state the last few years. It's about a 15% reduction of our peak in 2017. And then we've also folded in the various recycled water components. And we did see that, keep in mind, that's only through 2023. because it's based on data from the state water board. And that was about a 15% reduction, which speaks to that role of precipitation. That 2022, 2023 was one of our rather wetter years on record. And then lastly, we folded in as an appendix the milestone reporting, which we'll get to on the next module here. So once graphic, just to kind of set the stage here, this has time on the x-axis. On the left-hand side is the discharge volumes. Those are the white bars. Whereas on the right-hand side, it's got the precipitation. And really the intent here is to showcase the role of precipitation, where with those wetter years, such as the last two shown here, where in both cases we were north of 20 inches of rain. In those instances, we just really see that profound increase in the flows. So they are directly related. But what's the impact on TIN? And this is a plot similar to what Lorian shared earlier. These are the dry season average loads across the bay from 2013 through 2024. We peaked in 2017 at just below 51,000 kilograms a day. This past year, we were just below 44,000. That's about a 15% decline compared to the peak. And it's more or less the last few years, I tend to think we've more or less reached steady state considering the frequency of sampling. And that's really a testimony of that reduction to all the good optimization and upgrades we've seen across the bay. There are a lot of projects that are nearing the end of construction, starting construction. So I'm expecting to see those numbers further decline in future years. So that kind of gives you a feel for the group annual report. But really the area that I think is most relevant for this group is the recent milestones compliance summary. So again, this was an appendix in the group annual report. I've got in the PDF link here. This is a part of that link that Lorian shared on the BACWA site. And really the intent here is to give a status update on how the various agencies are advancing their nutrient journeys. So there's a lot of milestone elements associated with that, in particular identifying your alternatives to get you to compliance. What's your plan for compliance? What are those drawings? And what's kind of your status as you develop your portfolio of options? This next slide is not intended to go through the details, but it's really in place to showcase that there is one summary table in the report that's listed alphabetically on the left-hand side from A to Z. And it really just showcases where agencies are at in terms of whether or not they're early actors. Do they have a portfolio of options to get them to the compliance plan? But I want to bring your attention to the grouping over here that speaks to, which I'll capture on subsequent slides, what's your mix of your portfolio of strategies? And then lastly, what's your interest in nutrient trading? We're really trying to initiate the level of interest in that. So to get into the details and the breakdown of this table, I've got a few slides here that capture that. The first one is kind of what's the distribution of the agencies across the bay in terms of those that view themselves as early actors. They have a compliance pathway identified. We'll call that group 2. And then they've got a list of alternatives that they've identified. So that's kind of the status of where they're at in their journey. And while this gives you a distribution per se of the agencies, the next component is a reflection of when you look at the size of the agencies, this is captured by the permitted capacity on the left-hand side on the bottom plot, where those early actors represent over 600 MGD per permitted capacity. So it's the majority of the discharges across the bay, whereas those groups 2 and 3 represent about 160 MGD. So a lot of folks have made considerable advancement is my takeaway from this, and it really shows as you look at that compliance report, there's a very long table in there that really goes through each agency and states what their portfolio looks like in this day and age with the understanding each year going to refine that as agencies are not beholden to what's included in that because as we're all aware, it's a journey. As you're navigating and evaluating these alternatives, some of them might drop off your list, some might come to attention. So the intent is each year to refine that. So what's the distribution of those options look like? Again, this is a graphic from that appendix, and it kind of lays out the distribution of those alternatives. So this wasn't really a big surprise. As you look at your portfolio of options, you've got traditional treatment infrastructure, also known as upgrades to your plant, optimization and recycle water, those really rose to the top. We've got the distribution of those on what the status is within the organizations. I did want to bring your attention to the bookends there. Nature-based solutions is kind of aligns with the work that was led by Ian at SFEI, that there's about 6 agencies who have the space that would work for them for whether it be a ecotone or some sort of a unit open cell wetlands. Whereas for the nutrient trading, the way the RFI was structured was, the intent was to get a feel for those that were interested, and as we go through the scoping plan, we're gonna advance what that might look like. And what we found was a lot of that, the level of interest was the smaller agencies, which tended to make sense because for those agencies, just to choose a number, if they need to remove 5 to 10 extra kilograms a day, rather than implement all that infrastructure, they'd likely be more inclined to contribute to a larger upgrade elsewhere. So bear with me on this next plot. This one was one that was a little challenging for our group to get through, but I think it's very helpful once you understand the way it's laid out. Similar to the previous plots, we've got our 3 different groupings from early actors to alternatives identified. On the left-hand side is what those loads were in the 2024 dry season, that 43,700 kilograms a day. The middle column is essentially the status of where we're at. So the way we developed this number was we went back to that summary table, and those agencies that have a pathway to meet compliance, we use the loads that are in the permit for them, and all other agencies, we use their 2024 numbers. And really our big takeaway here is if you assume conservatively that agencies that are targeting that 20.5 milligrams per liter don't go below that, we're looking at right now at about an 18% reduction across the bay, with the understanding it's likely greater as agencies are going to go lower than that, which essentially points towards we've got about 22% delta to get us there to the end, which is listed on the right-hand side, the final permit limit. So it's kind of an overview of the compliance milestones. And the understanding is each year we're going to go through this exercise again. We're going to refine it. Hopefully we'll get a little smarter each year with the RFI. But as the data gets tighter, we're going to have a much better sense for the direction for the regional plan. So I noted earlier, and I had that slide on precipitation versus flow. So I did a little analysis that we've been intending to do for a while. This last week's reuse meeting kind of prompted that to finally get done, but really the question is, what's the role of precipitation on meeting these future nutrients? We have a lot of agencies that's a key component of their portfolio, and this first plot is a bay-wide look where we've got time on the x-axis. On the left-hand side is the dry season reuse volume in acre feet, and then on the right-hand side is that precipitation graph that you saw earlier. And this didn't really come as a surprise, but it was important to see it, is it's inversely related. The wetter the year is, the lower the reuse demand is. It's important to note that this is bay-wide, so there are several dischargers who are prohibited from discharging in the dry season, such as those up in Marin and Sonoma, the likes of Petaluma and so forth. And in their case, it's kind of independent of precipitation. So we wanted to look at this to another layer of interest. So we chose an agency who we know that reuse is a large component of their strategy, and that's Dublin San Ramon. And the trend is very similar, where it's inversely related, but it's a bit more profound. So to give you an example, our lowest year precipitation, 2021, we had less than 10 inches of rain. Their dry season reuse volume was greater than 4,000 acre feet. Whereas looking at that 2023 year, where we had, 33 plus inches of rain, that went down to just above 3,500. So you're looking at a 500 to 600 acre feet over that dry season. That could really be their difference. And the intent here is to really get folks aware of the role of that precipitation as you look at that strategy. And I think it's going to result in fostering some conversations with the board as we navigate what that looks like. Because the permit does have some language about, for unseasonably wet years, those months where it impacts it could be excluded from the analyses, but I think we need to work through that with them. So lastly here, and I'll hand it over to the Ninja Warriors, I think Lorian hit on this already, but for the third permit, most of you should have received an email from Mary Cousins last night. Thank you, Mary, for getting that out on the scoping plan. This is something that we've been working with the contract management group closely. We think it's very far along. There is a timeline included in the email to get everyone's feedback on that. It's due July 1st. The vision of meeting with the water board in June to walk them through it. There are, in that scoping plan, it's got a very detailed schedule that lays out what the RFIs look like, what the workshops look like, and really the idea here is where I shared with you the first compliance milestones. That's the first of many along this journey that's going to put us in a place to really understand what the various agencies are doing so we can come up with the regional plan. Thank you. Okay. Who's up first here? Is it Peter? Like Lorian, I'm not a pro at the Mac.
All right, let me just introduce them first. All right, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Lorian. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our allied squad of nutrient ninjas. First, Peter Kistenmacher, Assistant General Manager of Central Marine Sanitation Agency, and Nitin Goel, Operation and Optimization Division Manager at Central SAN, and lastly, Jignesh Desai, Senior Project Manager at SFPUC. You know, last night, when I was looking through everyone's presentations and their LinkedIn profile, I came across something very interesting. Between me, Nitin, and Jignesh, we have something in common. And it's probably not what you're thinking. Yeah, on that count, I'm probably ahead of all of you. No, we actually all went to the same college system in India for our undergrad. Its university is called IIT. It stands for Indian Institute of Technology. It's kind of an UC equivalent of India, except there's no surfboards or no in and outs. And just to clear things up, there were no actual ninja trainings at IIT. Those were more of OJT, on-the-job training. So we invited our panelists because they are right in the thick of choosing how to reduce nutrients at their plant. You know the biggest challenge? We have to do this while we keep our plant running. We have to do all our other infrastructure improvement projects. We have to balance our rates. And we have to keep our sanity in balance. So, before I hand it over, I also wanted to talk about EB Mudd's story on dealing with the nutrients. You probably remember for the chart, we actually have to reduce our nutrient by 64%. That's a big take, but we have made some progress. We actually started thinking about this back in 2020. Back when, besides the pandemic, Zoom fatigue was a recognized medical condition. So that's when we started our first pilot testing. And then from there, we started like a Netflix series renewal every time. We carefully think about what to add next season. We started season 1 with 10% flow, season 2 with 25, season 3 with 50, and then season 4, we were bold and we wanted to go 75. Well, that's when things got real exciting. And there was things are not going very well. And we were, that time, it was like not BNR anymore. It was more OMG. What is happening? Why is it happening to us? And after a lot of OS and OF moment, we found the truth. There was one of the gate was lying to in the DCS. It was not going all the way, but it was reporting as closed. So we lost a lot of our microbial rock stars, the nitrifiers and denitrifiers, but we recovered. But I want to make one thing clear. Don't try this at home. Meaning at your plant and expect it to work like magic. Because every plant, like our friend that Bill said, is like a careful, weird, a special kind of a snowflake. So yeah, what works at EB Mudd might cause chaos somewhere else, especially if your equipment is as moody as ours. Anyway, enough from me. Now let's hear from our nutrient ninjas.
Hey, thank you, Amit. Is there a clicker? This thing here. Or just push the button.
Yeah.
Cool. Got it. Thank you. Can you hear me? Good. So I did not go to college halfway across the world. In fact, I went to college right out the front door here. And it's good to be back in town. My name is Peter Kistenmacher. I'm with Central Marin Sanitation Agency. And I'll share a little bit about what we're going through in terms of nutrient planning. So if you have been to Marin, that's us right here, at the bottom, 580 at the very bottom, 101 going across the back, and then Mount Tam in the background, just to give you a sense of where we're located. Our service area is about 105,000 people, plus the San Quentin State Prison. And we have a very wide range of influent flows from 7 MGD to the highest we've ever had was 129 MGD. Yeah, that's our feeling. Existing facility, pretty straightforward, going from right to left here, just primaries, biotowers, aeration tanks, secondaries, and disinfection. And then at the top of the page, we have our solids handling and power generation facilities, as well as an organic waste receiving facility, which I'll come back to in a little bit. These are our targets. So we're trying to meet 480 kilograms per day. And last year, we put out about 1,100, just over 1,100, so a 57% reduction from last year, or a 63% reduction from our interim limit. I won't go through all these details, but this gives you a sense of the timing of our journey. We're right here at that red dot in the middle of the page. A lot of good work has been done to date. Some high-level master planning, some process studies. That graph right there is we were trying to figure out if our biotowers potentially could be nitrifying at night, and we could use them for nutrient removal. And then about a year ago, we hired a consultant team after an RFP to help us evaluate alternatives. And the goal, and by the way, this is all draft, so the timing may still change, but the goal right now is to pick an alternative by, say, October this year, present it to our board, and if our board approves, we would go into design and construction. And so the earliest we could be operating is 2029, although that's, I think, pretty optimistic. So next, I'll talk a little bit about how we're choosing between these different alternatives. We came up with this list of planning criteria, sort of all the usual suspects on there. I imagine most of us here are using something similar in your facilities, financials, constructability, operational, technology risk, and then very important, also being flexible for the future in case anything changes. So we then went through a ranking process with our team, just low, medium, high. Turns out we all ranked a medium, which, you know, I don't know how much help that is for choosing between alternatives. And to clarify, they're all important, but we're really trying to figure out, are a few of these much more important than the other ones? And, you know, cost and the ability to meet the permit at all times are, you know, pretty obvious ones. At the bottom of this slide, I want to point out a few additional CMSA drivers that are very important to us. The first one is wet weather flow management. I shared with you the large range of flows. And we just have to make sure that whatever system we design can function with our wet weather management strategy. So next is our organic waste program. And I apologize for showing a giant pile of food waste right before lunch, but this is a very important agency program. We just had our 15-year anniversary, and we are energy positive for wastewater treatment plant for the first time ever in 2024. Thank you. Yeah. And 2025 is looking even better, and we think we could get to 150% relatively easily with the infrastructure we have in place. And nutrient changes all that. As you can imagine, our power demand will go up. We'll have to expend more energy on treatment, and we'll move away from neutrality again. So we're looking with the consultants at a couple of scenarios, trying to figure out if we can maybe find like a sweet spot that balances the many community benefits of this program along with, the nutrient penalty, if you will. Okay, the last item that's really important for us is space. You can see from the picture we're boxed in by 3 busy roadways. So we're really focused on trying to get the most treatment out of the smallest amount of space. And we've made a decision to retrofit our existing aeration tanks that you can see they're kind of in the center of the picture. And it's not necessarily easy. It's a complex sort of surgical construction sequencing, but it'll provide us with a lot more space savings so we can reserve that for the future. And then along the same lines, we're looking at these wonderful new intensification technologies. I listed a few of them here. And we'll see if we phase those in over time or maybe start out with a combination of those right out of the get-go. Again, with the intention being to save as much space as possible on our facility. Talked about the timeline. So this time next year, if everything goes well, we should be under design for a selected alternative, and that's about everything I had to share with you today.
Thank you, Peter. Don't go away. We'll be taking questions later. Now I want to introduce Nitin Goyal from Central San.
Thank you, Amit. And I love your term about nutrient ninja. I'm not sure whether my wife and my kids going to agree to it. And second thing, what you said, hey, we have the college in common. I thought you will say something, related to our top thing, our hair, we're all losing hair, so we're all getting old. So all good. So I'm Nitin Goyal. I'm the Optimization Division Manager at Central San. I've actually talked to a few people here, and they were wondering what the Optimization Division is all about. So for us, optimization is all about, how best we can do more with less. And Optimization Division basically works on the business process optimizations and treatment and collection system optimizations. One of the things that what I realized, in this position for the last 3 years or so, one of the best optimization we can do if we can plan it right, design it right. And so we started dabbling more into planning and pre-design for some of the strategic projects. So one of the strategic projects that we're going to talk about is the nutrient management. Okay, let's get started. So these are some of the core projects that are supporting nutrient management at Central San. I'll start with the green colored projects, which is the projects that we have just completed in construction. We have finished our electrical blower project, and that's basically providing the required air, not just for today, but also for whenever the nutrient removal facility gonna come into the picture, because as you know, from a carbon to nutrient, the air demand is gonna change, so we address that. We have piloted the MABR pilot, and it's a very successful pilot. We'll talk more about that in later slides. Moving to the next color, which is the projects that are in construction, that are in orange. So we are retrofitting our aeration basins. We have 4 aeration basins, and we have retrofitted one of the aeration basin with the state-of-art diffusers. We have done that last year. As we speak, we are retrofitting our second aeration basin with again, the new diffusers there. Now moving to the next color, which is in purple. So the projects that are in design. So we are currently working on clarifiers. So clarifier structure are in good condition. However, those mechanical equipment that goes inside the clarifier to take the sludge out, those are operating for the last 40 years or so. And one important thing, I think we all know that, from a carbon to a nutrient removal facility, if you're using those organ pipes to take out the sludge, they may not be, adequate enough if you are concentrating the sludge and you basically increasing the solid retention time. So we are basically very actively looking at what is the right mechanism, thinking holistically. So the clarifier project is in design. Along with that, we have a new UV facility that we are constructing. You may be wondering why the new UV facility is basically part of the nutrients. Our existing UV system is tucked next to our aeration tank. So the whole idea is that if we can repurpose our existing UV basins for future night D-night, that would be fabulous. So just kind of like killing two birds with one stone. We'll talk more about the MABR full-scale demonstration, a very exciting thing for all of us. And now moving to the next color, which is the projects that are in planning, which is shown in this blue color. Again, this provides a great opportunity for us to look at things very much holistically. So we are looking from the energy standpoint and from electrical standpoint, whatever the loads that's basically being added by these nutrient removal facilities. So we are incorporating that as a part of the planning from the electrical load analysis and electrical project and energy project. And just to top it all, we also working on a nutrient management project. And I would say that's more of a program which is making sure that we are addressing that things that's not getting addressed as a part of these various projects. And there will be some miscellaneous improvements that what we have to do from a, dissolvate, flotation thickeners and such that. Okay. So this is a very exciting news for all of us. We have pilot tested the membrane aerated biofilm reactor technology last year at Central SAN. It was a very comprehensive pilot that we run for more than 8 months. Pilot was very successful. And it was so successful that we are right now, in 2025, we are retrofitting one of our existing aeration tanks so that we can utilize these big cassettes next year, so that in 2026, we will be a nutrient removal facility to some extent. So we are preparing our aeration basins for that. And the whole reason is that that will basically going to help us in reducing the future clarifiers and future aeration tanks. So the whole idea is so that we can minimize the overall cost for our ratepayers and how best we can get more out of our existing ANN tanks. So few more information about the membrane aerated biofilm reactor technology. The picture that what you see on the left, that is a picture of a full-blown cassettes. These are like 8 feet in height and 6 or 7 feet in the width and the breadth. What basically goes in these cassettes are these long, 8 feet long hollow fiber membranes that what you see in the middle. Just want to break the myth here. It is not a solid processing membrane or separation membrane. What goes in inside these membrane is only air. Air goes in and air comes out. And with the air, we develop 2 biofilms. First biofilm, which is close to the membrane, is a nitrifying biofilm. And as you know, the wastewater has ammonia in it, and wastewater has a carbon in it. The diffusion coefficient of ammonia, or basically ammonia being a smaller molecule, can move faster. It goes, attached to those biofilms that's closer to the membranes, and it get nitrified. So ammonia get converted into the nitrates. The second biofilm, basically, which has carbon in it, it takes that nitrate as an oxygen and convert nitrate into the nitrogen gas. So 2 biofilms. First is the nitrifying biofilm. Second is the denitrifying biofilm. And this is also why it's called simultaneously nitrifying, denitrifying technology. So, and then there's an air scouring that we do to make sure that we don't, grow this anaerobic or the outside biofilm too thick, so that the nitrification is still taking place, and all the good stuff. So moving on, before we start any pilot, there are a few questions that we like to answer. So the first 4 questions that we wanted to answer. First one is that, is the nitrogen removing bacteria growth can happen in our existing aeration tank? By what that I mean is that we don't want to import the nitrifiers from a different facility. So can we grow it in Central SAN's secondary influent? And yes, so we were able to grow that, and over the period of 3 or 4 weeks, we are able to having these nitrifiers in the MABR cassettes. Second is that, as we are talking about, every treatment plant is different. We are snowflakes. There's some amount of cyanide that's there in our secondary influent. So we wanted to see whether cyanide would have some kind of a negative impact on the nitrifiers or not. There's quite a bit of research that's out there which shows that the cyanide do have some, it basically lowers the reaction rate of the nitrifiers. However, in our pilot work, we have seen that it doesn't have a significant impact. Third is the biofilm management. Can we basically make sure that these biofilm doesn't go too thick, so stop nitrifying, and with the help of the scouring mechanism that's there, we are able to control the biofilm. The fourth and the most important of all, we don't want these cassettes to be kind of like, cannot be adjusted in our aeration tanks. So the whole idea was that, hey, is the nitrogen removal rate make sense? So it did make sense, and based upon the preliminary analysis, we can achieve the 40% TIN reduction within our existing aeration tanks once we install these cassettes. So some of the good questions that we answered as a part of the pilot, now we are moving towards addressing some other key questions as a part of the full-scale demonstration. One is obviously the cost. Cost is such a huge thing. Second is that can we mimic the results of the pilot in the full scale? So that's a second question we are trying to answer as a part of this full-scale demonstration. And the third is that what we don't know. So we'll get those questions answered as a part of the full-scale demonstration. Okay, so this is what we are actively working on right now. Procuring the cassettes that's shown on the top. That's one big item so that we can have these cassettes installed next year. We'll be using these aeration tanks and clarifiers for next 40, 50 years. So a lot of effort has been going on the condition assessments because, again, we'll be utilizing these facilities. As any agency which going to move from a carbon to the nutrient removal facility, the idea is that, hey, our staff should be well-trained. Our lab staff should be well-trained. So we'll be starting that training of operations staff exercise in a few months. Along with that, just one key aspect of this whole thing is that hydraulics. And we are making sure that there's enough mixers that's there, there's enough baffles that's there, so that there's no short circuiting that's taking place in the full-scale demonstration. Because that's one key difference between the pilot work versus the full-scale demonstration. Okay, so moving on. So yes, so we had this is hot off the press. This is the thing that we had the nutrient management kickoff meeting held at Central San last week. It was very well participated by the consulting. We have some folks from University of Michigan also join us who are doing some leading work with the biofilm management, along with our Central San executive team, and we are all very much all into this. One last thing, as I'm standing at UC Berkeley, I just have to mention this. This project actually won the CWA Dr. Jenkins Research Achievement Award, so we're happy with that, So over to you, Amit.
Thank you, Nitin. Now I'd like to welcome Jignesh Desai.
All right. I think now I'm really standing in between your lunch and us, right? So before this session, Amit told me if I talk too much, you will be ever banned from coming back to BACWA meetings. So I have to see if I'm succeeding or failing today.
There's plenty of food. No worries. Take your time.
Thank you. So thanks to BACWA for invitation to share our SFPUC journey on nutrient management. This photo is very telling, the constraint that we have to live with. And somebody asked me last week, why do I like black and white photos? I think it really shows the character of wastewater. It's not colorful. It is black and white. So we have two main initiatives for SFPUC currently going on. One of the is the Treasure Island treatment plant, which is the really cute project. very good components, full stream nutrient removal, recycled water. We have constructed wetland, and we are making good strides on that project. We are about 75% construction completed, and this year we are anticipating to start up that facility. So if Amit agrees and BACWA agrees, we can come back and share our lessons learned from that startup and design build project. So we are very early on nutrient journey compared to these two gentlemen. They are making a good progress, I have to say. So just a little bit about me. I don't like my own photo, but this inspires me. Every time things get tough, I look at this photo and I get again energized. So it's our 66-inch force main pipe we just constructed, part of our new headworks facility that started up last year. Now it's full of you know what, right? So learn every day. Today already I have learned quite a bit from regulatory folks, and thanks again to BACWA for this collaboration where we can learn about OMG process. We can learn about from the regulators as well. I think it's very important that we cross the line and walk the mile in regulator shoes, and they walk the mile in our shoes, and kind of see what are the constraints and difficulty each side, and come together and share ideas. So I learned already quite a bit today. I've been working with 26 years with PUC. I don't think about retirement yet because I'm very enjoying my work, but once in a while thought comes for retirement, so a few more years. I live in Bayview, about 7 minutes drive from my home, and those who are looking for new house, don't buy close to the plant. You know why? Otherwise, you'll end up at work every weekend just thinking, I'll be there for a few hours, catch up, and you end up spending all day on weekends. So but stay nearby because you are the first stakeholder that you can represent to the community. Again, quick, we are just very beginning journey on planning of the nutrient project at Southeast Plant. And we'll talk about project delivery approach, try to catch up with these two gentlemen. They are racing ahead, so how do we kind of catch up, right? So we have started focusing on delivery as well, which I'll share a little bit about it. So four-prong approach on our planning phase. Bread and butter for everybody to look at the loads and flow projection that I'll share a little bit about. What are the project drivers? And every stakeholder in the organization has their drivers. So how do we come together and make sure that all needs and drivers are at least surfaced, and then make decisions which are the priority drivers and which are secondary drivers. The third step we are doing is the needs assessment report, looking at the holistically entire facility and see how do we get the best buck for our best outcome for our expenses that we'll be using for capital project. And last but not least, project delivery approaches, looking at the entire project life cycle, looking at the end result where we want to get to. I think it's important to focus early on how entire project will be operationalized and delivered. I didn't draw a line between the boxes because these all four are going in parallel, concurrent activities. They are not sequential. So a little bit about baseline about Southeast Plant. Two horizontal line kind of reflects to the y-axis. Those are the limits in our permit, nutrient watershed permit that we've been discussing. And two vertical lines are kind of, first line is important because Southeast Plant is going through a major digester upgrade project, which is thermal hydrolysis process. So 2027 comes, we'll see some interesting dynamics, so to say, the concentrated filtrate coming back to the influent. And then last but not least, 10-year compliance, that's the vertical line. Some of the diamonds are our real data, measured data that's shown here. A lot of information, and I think I have to look at my little bit notes so I don't say which projection is what. We looked at the 4 different projection information out there. The first one is the San Francisco Planning Department growth, which is basically based on ABAG, which Association of Bay Area Governments. They use that data for transportation and housing and all types of needs, right? So that's what our planning department uses, which is about 1.3% annual growth rate. We look at the sustainable urban growth rate, which is about 1%. That's the second line from the top. And then the third one is California Department of Finance, that assumes the minimum growth, like 0.4% annual growth. And last one is the historical observed growth between 2000 and 2019, which is 0.5%. And anybody in audience, if you have a crystal ball that projects correct population, please let me know, because we really need that crystal ball, what to design for. We looked at the 2 variations for these 4 projection growths, and one of them is pretending COVID never happened, just like pretending election in November never happened, right? So we looked at continuing growth from, let's say, continue as it was happening in 2019. That's the chart on the left. And chart on the right is, let's see the current where we stand and pick up those growth level percentage from there. You can see 2 of them are very optimistic and 2 of them are more like realistic. So as an agency, it creates little challenge where to land our population growth and how to size our project correctly. So again, process engineers are very good in collecting data. As in plant, every plant has tons of data, historical data. The next step we are doing is looking at the sensitivity analysis with the population growth and see what data points will land us to this different load projection for different constituents. My process engineers, even after having data, they always want to do more sampling and say, Jignesh, can you fund more money for more sampling? I say, okay, let's do it. I think the more data is really, we can run all the models we want and they can give a good projection, but actual doing sampling and getting real-time data is very important. As I mentioned, our biosolids project is going to bring another characteristic of filtrate back to the influence. So we're going to continue our sampling program as the new processes come online. Project challenges, not very different than many of you see at your plant. One of the first challenges I've been saying about growth is how do we not overbuild our project and right-size the project, right? You want to keep in mind the future, but also not putting too much expense up front, which the projection of the growth may not realize. Ratepayer affordability, we heard quite a bit about that. I have this vision that came 25 years ago, and it still keeps flashing in my head time to time, where a single parent mother, hardworking, have 2 kids, and one of the kids say, hey, I need a new toy. My friend has this amazing toy that I like to have, and mother says, sorry, we have to pay the sewer bill. We have so many expenses this year, and can't do that, right? So I always keep that in mind and brings kind of tears in my eye that we need to make sure every dollar reaches far and tighten our belts because it's a real challenge. Site constraints, you look at the photo I showed it to you, we have no place to put our nutrient projects. So how do we innovate? And the difficult times are the one which makes you more creative, and our site constraints are numerous site constraints, spatial constraint, process-wise constraints, very difficult site to work with. Peak wet weather flow, unlike other 36 agencies that discharges into the bay, we are a truly combined stormwater sewer system, and that creates another good challenge, which I'll discuss in next slide. So what are the potential solutions we are looking at? One thing my operation manager reminded me that one of the solutions we can do modular and incremental, so we don't overbuild from get-go, keeping in mind space for future expansion. So let's right-size the plant, and incrementally improve our nutrient reduction situation. Another thing is flexible system design thinking, and permitting flexibility is very important as well. We need to work with our permit agencies and explain the situation, and they understand and work together, collaborate, and get the best outcome for every facility, particularly our very unique facility in that sense. So this is our little configuration of our wet weather flow. And the challenge is that this beautiful nitrifiers, right, that creates in the nutrient reduction, help us nitrifying, we cannot tell them when the rain is supposed to start, okay, take a nap for a while. We're gonna turn off the lights, and when the rain is gone, we'll turn on the lights and come back and do your job. Poor guy's gonna washed out, right? So our current configuration is to do 150 mgd of secondary treatment and 100 mgd of primary treatment. So we have to really think about it. Do we want to build 150 mgd nutrient facility, or can we do something more optimal and somehow create a situation that water quality can still be maintained and allow us to do a little bit more primary and high quality secondary treatment. So those are some of the things that we are thinking about managing wet weather situation. We are 250 mgd plant for wet weather, and it's not a INI type of peak. Our peaks sustain for quite a long time. It's not 6-7 hours of peak period. How am I doing, Amit? Okay. I want to come back next time, this conference. Some of the key consideration is Nitin talked about, there are a lot of technology advancement in our industry as far as nutrient concerns. So one of the things we are gonna look at is different technologies, evaluate them, and choose the right technology that works for a specific plant. Size and capacity, we've been talking about it. One of the important things, nobody stops flushing while we construct anything, right? So how do we maintain plant operation while maintaining our compliance limit? And that's where also another flexibility that we need to look at, not only construction time, but post-construction as well. Rehab needs, every time we potentially do a new project, there are things that were built in 1952. Believe it or not, we have things from 1952 in San Francisco at the plant. Power upgrades is always a challenge for every plant. May that be our own, we have our own power enterprise gives the power to us, and we have PG&E. So really planning ahead for your power needs is very important. Early engagement with your utility providers. We have learned some lessons hard way on the power side, which has delayed our projects, but now we are in a good shape. Peak weather, wet weather, we talked a little bit about it already. Some of the additional consideration, how do we holistically look at to reduce the flow? Can we divert the flow to other facilities, like we have a beautiful outfall and going into the ocean? Can we do something with that? Reducing influent load, reclaim water. We talked quite a bit about water reuse today, how that can help the nutrient strategy. And then in terms of load, again, this comes to where system-wide thinking, not get stuck only one. As an engineer and project manager, we are very fixated on our task, but I think this type of work will require holistic look at the entire treatment plan and say, look at, we do only mainstream, we do side stream, we do hybrid. How do we get the best combination of the processes that lead us to a compliance that we need to with the constraints we have? That leads to my last few slides. One of the early things that we went out and we wanted to look at the collaborative delivery approaches. This slide, very busy slide, but depicts the different delivery models that we as an agency evaluated with different stakeholders from our engineering, construction management, wastewater, any stakeholders we can find in our organization. We spent about 3 months to look at this different delivery, develop the criteria, and see what is important. There is no magic bullet with any delivery method. One has to evaluate every organization maturity and situation and kind of see whether design bid build works for you, CMGC. The third one is the fixed price design build. As far as CMGC goes, we are about $3 billion worth work through CMGC in the last 7-8 years. Both the biosolids and headworks were CMGC. Done a lot of design bid build. Treasure Island is our fixed price design build. And then progressive design build, where you bring the contractor from day one and the engineer is working directly for contractor. And in our industry, the collaborative delivery is picking up the steam. And I think complex projects like nutrient removal, where you have an existing site, there are something to be strive for bringing contractor early on. So after spending 3 months of talking with all the stakeholders, we have made the decision on the delivery method. We are moving forward with the progressive design build. We have started the procurement. We did the 3-prong procurement. We went out with requests for interest to the larger community, and we got very good responses from community in terms of what would entice them to come and work with us. I think the progressive design bill provides the sole responsibility, and particularly where the permit 2029, when it gets renewed, we don't know what it will bring, right? So progressive design bill allows us more flexibility, adaptability. We'll have a digester process start. So all that component, I think really real-time adjustment can be made with the progressive design build. We got our marching orders. So our second prong on procurement was RFQ. We just closed this week, and I have signed the confidentiality agreement, so I cannot tell how many teams came and part of the RFQ, but we'll be moving into the RFP phase very soon. Looking at the schedule, we all know 10 years was written in our permit, and size of this infrastructure, I think everybody's discussing, is takes time to plan, design, get the stakeholder community input to the process, and then design and build, right? And one of the things that we are looking, I'm not gonna go each line item, but look at the last 2 horizontal lines. The progressive design bill really provides opportunity for concurrent design and construction, and we are gonna pick up some steam there, because you don't have to finish your design all the way and then go for the pricing. We are gonna progressively design and construct at the same time and save some time for not doing a linear progression. So that's my last slide, and Amit, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, the panel. They are the true pioneers and true ninjas. You have to agree. So we about 5 to 10 minutes. So I have a lot of questions for you guys, but I don't want to hog up the time. I'm going to turn it to the audience, and to get some questions. If you guys don't have questions, then I will be, launching mine. So, yes, Jenny.
I just want to feed this to Jignesh. Jignesh, can you tell the audience how expensive this Southeast Nutrient Reduction project is anticipated to be?
Amit, the chart I saw, it was the highest chart, right? So our investment is around $1.5 billion budgeted in the last capital planning cycle. We are going to try to bring it to the design to budget concept, but it's a very huge investment. Our Treasure Island project was about $220 million project budget, where the design build component is $165 million. So really huge commitment, part of the SFPUC towards the nutrient reduction.
Some of the lighting has changed, so I can't see.
Karen North, City of Palo Alto. So great presentation. I just wanted to, make a comment. I think it's fantastic you're doing the MABR pilot. Palo Alto is actually in the middle of full scale. don't have the MBRs in, but I think it would be really great for us to go around and make sure that all the engineers that are actually trying to implement this and do open heart surgery and keep our plants running, that we provide opportunities as BACWA communities to get us to these facilities so you can actually see how they're navigating all of the challenges real time and not, you know, sugarcoat it and navigate them and walk through, especially because different scales, different size, everything, because I know you did a great job of presenting and that was fantastic, and I know my staff really appreciated that, and that's what we all need to do because that's the whole point. So I think if we can continue to do that, Lorian, get everyone around, and then also the costs and the space constraints, we're in the exact same thing. Postage stamps, we're not as bad as Millbrae, thank God. But that's something that we also need to continue to work, and how are we gonna continue these construction projects? So I think that's fantastic. So I think all of us need to figure out how are we gonna do all these upgrades as you're alluding to. I don't know how you're gonna do yours with 179, which is that what you said, that you're an I&I? What are your plans to get your I&I down? That's my biggest question. Because that's out of your control, collection system, right?
That's correct, yeah.
So what's your plan?
Well,
So-
we actually have Steve Moore speaking this afternoon.
So I'm just gonna kind of like support what Karen you are saying. I cannot agree with you more, especially with these new technologies out there. And you know, we're all wastewater agencies. We are very conservative, and we should be conservative. And yes, you know, on the pilot scale, things worked well, but we have to tread very carefully. How I see is that we have to be cautiously optimistic and try not to put all our eggs in one basket, and you know, just kind of like see what's out there and how best you can look at things more holistically. And other things that can rise to the top is something like indents, which is you know, what Peter was showing in one of his slides is cyclones, which helps in selecting the bacteria that settles faster, so you don't require that many clarifiers. So yeah, so just keep your eyes open and work well within our community and with our wastewater agencies. We had the CWA tour of our facility when the pilot was running, and I think we already hosted a BACWA meeting at our central SAN. So yeah, sharing is so important. I agree with you more.
Anyone else? Okay, while you think about the question, I have one. So have you found the maintenance requirements for the MABR system? And I heard about membrane fouling.
Yeah, so great question, Amit. So maintenance, so membrane fouling is all depend upon where these cassettes will be put in. So let's say if you put in these cassettes at the front of the aeration tanks, that's where the most of the carbon coming in. So that's where the scouring mechanism has to be perfected. So for agencies who are looking at this, have to make sure that you have enough scouring at the front of the treatment plant so that the biofilm does not grow too thick. Once kind of like, you know, as carbon kind of like get reduced, broken down, as you go down the downstream of the aeration tanks, so you probably don't require that much amount of scouring, but the front of the aeration tanks, you definitely require a lot of scouring. Second, the maintenance requirement. On that, I think your guess is as good as mine, because you know, we are obviously starting this new journey of having this demonstration testing next year. So we'll get to know more. However, there's a one full-scale treatment facility operating in Yorksville, that's in Chicago area, and you know, WEFTEC takes place every alternate year in Chicago. So we have visited that facility a couple of years. That facility is 3.5 MGD, and it's operating full-scale MABR since 2017. Based upon our visits, doesn't seem like there's a lot of maintenance requirement, but yeah, something that we have to continue to look for.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Arvind. No, we get to record you.
I have to be careful. My question was, I think earlier we heard from some of the regulators about looking at multi-benefit solutions to achieve the nutrient goal. I think so far I have heard most of you have, at least not in Ignace, you're just starting up. So are we. But from Nitin or Peter, we didn't hear anything on that because most of us are so congested in and basically site constrained. So we don't have a lot of land, and that's probably majority of our treatment plants except maybe San Jose that has a lot of land. So this question probably might be for Mike. Looking at all the treatment plants, how many plants do you see or plants that you are looking at that have really a viable multi-benefit strategy or part of the solution, such as nature-based solution that takes a lot of land and still is not able to take 100% of the, or cannot be 100% of the solution. It only treats a portion of it. For example, the other day I was attending one of the presentation from San Jose, 70, 80 acre of land and only about, 10% of the nutrient reduction. So are you seeing any of those and are they being considered enough?
Yeah, good question, Arvind. So I think it boils down to that while most of the speakers here talked about their traditional treatment infrastructure strategies, it doesn't mean they don't have a portfolio of things they're looking at. This audience has seemed to be the most applicable, whereas I can tell you there's a handful of agencies that are looking at nature-based solutions. There's been several RFPs that have gone out. For example, Hayward's advancing theirs. Jackie, who's on the side, the First Mile project. I know Central Sand's considering it. I think the other layer here from the regional solutions outside of the nature base is more on the reuse piece. And on the reuse piece, again, it just goes back to the portfolio discussion, just so you got built-in resiliency in your plan. Because as we look into the future, as agencies positioned to doing the roughly 40% reduction that varies across the plants, kind of the reuse is a key part of that, and it can kind of serve as a means to get them lower. So as they look into the future in the event that the limits were to be more stringent. So I don't see, in most cases, the regional solutions as being the silver bullet, if you will. It's just a part of the portfolio for each of the options, for each of the agencies.
So as you know, PUC has our water, power, and wastewater services. So we have started collaborating with our water enterprise side with their pure SF water program. So we are looking into nexus between their pure SF water and our nutrient project, and how do we make the best for our SF PUC. So those conversations are ongoing, and I'm very hopeful that it will lead to some good conclusions.
Maybe a couple more questions before we break for lunch. Yes.
This isn't a question, but kind of building on Jenny's point about the cost of our project, more just a plug for one of the things that PUC has been working on with our regulatory team and our loans and grants team is advocacy around funding for this work and really focusing on the regional need. And I think folks in here probably have heard this from people other than me and other venues, but I just wanted to make one more plug for engaging. I know a lot of smaller agencies don't have as much in the way of resources for that kind of advocacy and engagement, but PUC is ready and willing to sort of organize us and lead and provide talking points and sort of tell folks when they need to call their elected representatives, but it really does make a difference to have that regional coalition and need to be able to point to, and for electeds to hear from their own constituents, right? We can call our electeds, but we can't really call your electeds, and make the case about the importance of this funding for their district, right? So just please do engage on that if you have any need or interest for some external funding to support your projects. I know we're all probably each in different situations in our, snowflakes in terms of rates and so forth as well, but I think a lot of people probably also could use a little extra funding to get to that $11 billion.
Any other questions? Yes.
Hello, Steve Moore, Ross Valley Sanitary District, JPA member of the CMSA, which you heard from. I'm a little puzzled by the I&I question with nutrient requirements that are summer-based, but I would love to have a more of a discussion on that. But actually turn this around, and a lot of Bay Area treatment plants were designed to deal with the I&I that was, obviously documented in the 70s and 80s. And the CMSA plant was over-designed in some ways, for its digestion, its primary treatment. And so I was wondering, Peter, if you wanted to comment on the opportunities that you and other treatment plants around the region have to take advantage of the existing facilities that were over-designed for wet weather treatment.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. And it's a good question. And Karen, I didn't go into that because of timing, but we do blend. That's the missing piece, I think, that we're not going to treat 129 MGD at this point. It's in our permit. It's been past practice for a long time. And Steve, your second question, there has been talk about repurposing the 7 primary clarifiers we have. And in the summertime, we need like 1, to give you a sense. So there's a lot of infrastructure out there that's sitting underutilized. And the devil's in the details, right? Then looking at Linda here, she looked at our plan at one point and she said, well, they're not deep enough, right? Or they don't have these other advantages. So the process engineers will have to answer that question. It's usually not as simple as doing that, but it's a nice asset, and it would be nice to be able to repurpose that. And then, on the digester side, since you mentioned that, those were over-designed as well, and that's why we have a thriving food waste program. So.
Thank you. I want to thank the panel. This was an extremely informative session. I hope you got a lot out of it. I also encourage you during the network break and after hours to ask the remaining question. I know I have a lot of questions here. I'm going to be asking them. So with that, let's plan on coming back at 1:20. Thank you, everybody.